Okay, we're going to call the meeting of Thursday, September 12th of the City Charter Review Committee to order. And if we could please have the roll call. Our guest tonight is Rebecca Urdialis, who is sitting in for our staff liaison, who is going to be Asia, who's at a meeting up north right now. So go ahead.
Okay. Diane Gadaris.
Present.
Jeffrey Hank. Jonathan Foreman.
Present.
Dr. Ruben Martinez.
Here.
Jill Rode.
Here.
Pam Weil.
Here.
Dr. Veronica Wilkerson Johnson.
Present.
Dale Kreidoff.
Yeah.
Lynn Richardson. Here. Council Liaison Mark Meadows.
Okay, thank you. Move on to 1.2, approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve. Moved by Dr. Martinez, second by Pam Weil. Any changes or additions to it? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. Moving on to 1.3, approval of the minutes. I'd like to move that the minutes be approved with one little addition here. After Veronica Wilkerson Johnson, in parentheses, arrived at 6:45, I'd just like to add to that, due to teaching first day of class at LCC. That I would move the minutes to approve. Second. Friendly amendment. Second.
Second.
6:30. 6:30. I say 6:25? 6:35, after 6:35. Okay, so moved by Gadaris and seconded by Foreman. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. So our minutes are approved. Next, we move on to communications from the audience. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward and talk? I'm glad you're here. I will just say on our website, we have the communications as part of the agenda the minutes that will be included. We did receive the email with all of the communications that have been going back and forth. I will add that I did do an interview with WKAR. They just wanted to understand what the Charter Review Committee was doing and how it operates. So you might hear that coming up at some point. Moving on to new business, item number 3, review of the materials from the city manager. Does anybody have any questions about any of those?
I didn't know if you wanted to discuss with the group about using the mics.
Sure. Why don't you tell us how we're supposed to do that?
Yeah, just you gotta hold it close. These are new, they're portable. We bought them to make sure that anybody in the audience, if mine's even on.
The bottom. At the bottom, you turn them on. A little circle.
I see it in the corner. So then it lights up green. And so requested by Councilmember Altman, who said when we attended Transportation Commission meeting in this room, it was hard to hear any of the members around the commission as well as the public when they get up to address. So this microphone system is portable. The other 2 rooms have permanent systems in place, but this is so the audience can hear and each other can hear when sitting around or raising or discussing items. And then also we're recording this meeting to then be placed on our website for the residents and any other interested party to continue to see what we're doing here at the Charter Review.
So do you have to press the button to speak, or once you turn it on, it's on?
You can press the button to go red and then it's off. And then as long as it's green, it's on, but the button will turn the mic on.
Oh, so you can mute.
You can mute. So we can.
Just want to know what the function of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, this is really great because I have an ear infection and can't hear out of one ear, so this is great. So I'll be able to hear it all. You talk to me. Okay, so did anyone have anything else that you wanted? Any materials that came up that you wanted? I know we talked a little bit about any possible charter amendments that had come forward before that hadn't passed or anything. Did you find anything in the archives?
So yes, I have pretty thick document where each of the resolutions for the amendments to the prior charter back in 1997 were submitted to council in their amendments. So I can upload that and put it on the next agenda or email it out. I'll try to do it as one packet if it's not too large. If not, we'll put it on the portal and you can be able to access it and review it. But it'll give you some of the prior discussions that took place and what recommendations came out of the 1997 Charter Review Committee that went to council and then was put on the ballot for approval. I think it was 34 items.
I think it's more like 43, but you got the numbers right.
So yes, I'll make sure you get all of the items that were presented to council at the time and put on ballots for the residents to vote in.
Okay, that's great. Some good reading, I'm sure. All right, but if anyone doesn't have anything else, we're just
I
gonna.
have something kind of in that vein.
Sure.
I've come across some interesting websites in some history of boards in Detroit and changes in charters relevant when they changed the standard charter. Is that something that I should send to you and then you decide to send to the group? Or
I think the group should feel comfortable communicating amongst,
to everybody?
disseminating
Yeah,
information.
okay.
Again, not communicating
Right,
back and forth
okay.
about it,
So
but
feel
simple
free to
dissemination is
share.
acceptable.
Okay, perfect.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay, we're gonna move on to 3.2, which is the website review. I hope everyone had a chance to look at that. Our staff did a really great job of putting everything together and getting it on there. I think you'll see at the bottom of the website where where they'll have the links for everything, the recordings, the minutes, and our schedule, as well as the way to communicate with us. And I think you saw in the communications that I was waiting until they got it up, and then I just directed the person who wanted to know where the communication was, that this is where to go. And we can just pass that on. We'll get under communication plan if we want to do something more with that. But the website's there and it's good. It's good. It's got the things that we need. And if at any time anybody thinks we need to add something else, please feel free to bring that up.
So if I may.
Yeah.
So Carrie Sampson, who's the communication director for the city, is holding off on a press release until tonight's meeting. And you give a thumbs up to the website or any additional information so that we will let the residents know through a press release that the website's there and that the email to communicate with this body is elcharter@cityofeastlansing.com. Yes, elcharter@cityofeastlansing.com is the official email that residents or the public can send communications to this body, and then it will be added to your agenda for each of your meetings under the communications.
So far, everything's pretty perfunctory. We're getting things in order here, so that's good. Our next thing would be then 3.3, the structure of the public meeting, which we'll have in about 2 weeks. So I want to hear from you what you think. I have a rough idea of how we'd start that meeting, and so I'm just going to give that to you, and then I think you should talk about items under each of this. We would do the roll call like we did. We'd have to approve of the agenda and minutes from this meeting, and we'd have a welcome to the audience. And then I wanted to know if you wanted to do maybe introduction of members, whether you wanted to do say they can all see your name, but if you wanted to say a little something about who you are, and we should have like kind of the same kind of idea of what we're going to say, whether it's what you've done with the city or why you're interested in being on the committee, interested to know what you would like to say in those things. But we should probably be consistent with what we do so that everyone gets a picture of everybody here. And we can talk about that. And then I think it's very important for our attorney to explain, just like he did to us when we started off, what was in our packet, but what we're going to do, and what this whole process is, and what the home rule city is, just exactly what you did before. And then the process, and that's what I have handed out to you. And it was just, I know Mr. Hank, who can't be here tonight, as a commitment that he made, and was, as you know from last meeting, he was trying to rearrange our meeting so he could be here, but we have it recorded, so they'll hear everything that's going on. But this charter review process, I think it would be important that we explain to everybody that our part is part of the charter review process, and then it goes to city council. And so I kind of put on here what I thought Tony told us that was the process, and where we end, there's still quite a bit that goes on after without us. And so if that looks okay, then we would have that available to people. And I don't know if you want to put it on the website too. And then we explain our alternates, because that's important too, and we could do that during the introductions. And then the website materials, and then allow them to start the communications back to us. So that was my rough idea, but if you think there's other things that should be at this meeting, I think we should talk about that, and we should talk about how we want to introduce ourselves. I'm open to anything, but just getting through that first part of the meeting probably be about, I'm guessing, about roughly a half an hour, because once we get settled, if we have a lot of people here, who knows, we'll be here. So I'm looking for that. Okay.
Meeting schedule, is that on the website? That would be something that we share. Yeah, but it's something that to note in the,
Okay.
there's a packet that people can pick up. And that I would suggest too, that we have like the description be something that people can walk out with too, like, you know, like the process, whatever, like people have a hard copy packet.
I know.
Yeah, yeah.
So you would want the meeting schedule, the process, this process?
Sure, yeah, but just the idea that people could have a hard copy. And maybe they're available, maybe they don't have to take one, but.
Yes, but
And I like your idea of us introducing ourselves so that people can see that around this table are representatives of various functions that we've all done that are very different. And so each one can maybe say, oh, great, there's someone here who's done planning or who's done housing, or so I think that would be important for the residents to get a chance to see that.
so it sounds to have us identify any work we've done within the city. Makes me start right away to say, should we say what neighborhood we're from? Does that matter to
No,
anybody?
that's yeah.
Other thoughts?
This is gonna be the first meeting, so are we talking about for each of the public meetings, we would go through the same process? Or is this the kind of intro to the whole thing? And then the next meeting will be more targeted, like we're gonna be like specific sections.
That would be my understanding. I don't think we go through everything every time.
Right, I think we should want to talk about that too, to let people know that future meetings are gonna be focused on individual pieces of the actual document.
So it seems like when we have this meeting schedule and process that we actually talk about those, not just put them in the handout, but
Yeah,
we talk
yeah,
about those.
yeah. Especially clear, you know, come back if you're really interested in section 7 on these dates, that's.
Other comments? Okay, a quiet group here tonight. All right, so we have so far a name, our neighborhood, what work we've done within the city. Anything else you'd like to add about yourself? About your profession? What you've done? Not necessarily that you have to have a profession, but you want to do that? Bring backgrounds to it?
Maybe a sentence or two.
Yeah, we don't want this bunch of material. Because we've been in the newspaper and there's some of the stuff on the webpage already.
Get a little bio of what we wrote that printed. Is that available on the webpage? That might be worth having our little bios that we recruited with our.
We'll add that.
Okay. Well, then I don't think we really need to do the background, or do you think we need to keep it simple?
Just keep this.
Okay. Anything else? Okay with that? Okay, so we're going through this really fast. 3.4, the communication plan. I'm gonna let you tell me how you would like to roll this out. Already talked about a press release that we're gonna have today about the website, with the addition of the bios on there. Mark,
Just one suggestion is that, because you've got a meeting, another meeting before you have the public meeting. Is that right?
No.
Public.
That's the very next meeting is the public.
Yeah.
Meeting? Okay. I think this press release that talks about the website should also blast that this public meeting is going to be taking place and maybe describe a little bit about what people can do when they come there. Talk about things they think should be changed in the charter to encourage that, and then we should follow that with another press release to try to capture it, because we've got a 2-week period here,
So once
so that we remind people that this is happening. I want to get as many people to that first public meeting as possible, I think, who have an interest in the change.
I guess my question would be to who is receiving the press release? So what does the communications contact list look like?
It's all of the
Meeting.
media, so televised, radio, print media in the area receive the press releases.
In Michigan, so local television,
Yes,
local radio.
Eli,
Internet.
yeah, and then it's posted to our website.
Any suggestions from our peanut gallery? Is there any outreach towards the inclusion places that might be more, you know what I mean? That in NAACP, and sort of like say job postings too, and that sort of thing. Do we have a expansive outreach?
I will make sure that we do have an expansive outreach. I'll work with Ms. Hardy on that, as well as identifying groups that we should send this to that, again, as you mentioned, may post them so that we expand and make sure that we're getting a good representation.
And what about some kind of communication to city committees? Because all my years on city committees, I would have liked, we're already got a group full of engaged. Make sure they're aware that it's happening,
Yeah.
like it becomes kind of part of outreach. I don't know who's gonna be there. Ahead of it.
the commissions, channel 24 too will be posted.
Pam has me thinking as well, the neighborhood associations.
Ah, good one.
Although that depends on then, the president of the association making sure that they pass that on. Yeah, when they get that, they should be also encouraged in big black letters to
They
pass
share.
this on to their
Yeah.
members.
Yeah, I do believe that that is a positive cycle. The more we engage our committees, the more we engage our neighborhood associations, the more they engage back, to feel encouraged and like it's participation.
Okay, so that's pretty comprehensive for this first one. As we go along, would you think that we should have some communication with council at any time? Mark's our liaison, but that's a medium where we actually have televised if people are there. Should we do an update periodically at council? Should we do it during what point of the schedule would you suggest we do that? And we just plan what are the points, like we're talking right now, what are the points that we're saying, like maybe we've gone through chapter 2 to 4 and there's no changes. And we have a schedule, and do we do that before our next meeting? Should we go to council and just say the committee is ready to go and wants you, or does Mark say that at his opening time?
Well, one of the jobs of a liaison is to communicate with other council members about what's going on with their boards or commissions that they're liaison with. Generally, that happens when something sort of major happens with a board or commission. Otherwise, we'd just be saying, yeah, they met last week and, everything seems fine. But in this case, I would suggest that beginning probably, we have kind of a weird schedule coming up because of the election. We have 3 meetings in October. I think one of those is a discussion only meeting. And then we don't meet again until November 19th because of the intervening election and sort of what we anticipate the fallout might be, from that election. But we generally have one discussion only meeting per month. I would not suggest that you make a monthly report, but I think every other discussion only meeting should have a place for this committee to just talk about what's been going on and where you're headed next or something like that. I don't know if that works with what you were thinking or not, but that would probably be in December that you would make your first report of some kind. So I don't know if that schedule is what you were looking for, Diane, but that's where we're at in terms of our schedule or meetings.
We'd be about a third through the charter at that.
Yeah.
step.
Okay. And so maybe at a third of the way through, if I was looking at December 5th as a meeting, but I know you don't have. I'm not sure if you have-
December 31st.
Do you have a second one?
Yeah,
December 10th.
The next week, right?
And maybe a discussion only, but still
Yeah.
appropriate time.
Well, I'll plan on that for right now. See.
Can I assume that you would bring it up in the October meeting, say it's started, you've begun?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
just a
think
general
all the
report.
council members are aware of this.
I know.
This is like
And I announced it at the last meeting that
Okay, so they know
tonight
what
we were
happened.
meeting and that there's a website and email, so I'll keep plugging it under my city manager.
To the
Yeah.
extent that we have a meeting, like the week before the next meeting, my practice would be to remind the community that we've got another
Yes,
charter
sure.
commission meeting, coming up, or charter committee meeting. Yeah, and when you were talking about communications, I just want to confirm that includes digital communication about this as well, right? Right.
When you say,
It isn't just press release. We'll do digital communication.
yeah, you mean on social media and all that? Yes.
Okay.
Press releases on social.
Because I think
We'll take some of that and
younger
carry over.
Younger members of this community are looking at that. They're not reading Eli or anything else. They're looking at their digital.
Less and less.
Is there a way that Carrie could monitor the hits? I believe there used to be a way to monitor the hits on that website, so at least we know how many people, because that's where we're directing. We know at least how many people are going to that.
So there is a way, and we get it quarterly. We're gonna ask for it monthly so that we can see directly. So we're gonna try to get access to that monitoring system so that we can see as we put out certain information, what information is getting the most hits. So yes, we are working on that. I did speak to Carrie about it because I was interested in some of the material that was being put out. How do we know people are seeing it on our website or compared to the social media outlets that we use? And so we're trying to evaluate all of that overall. For this.
I want to point out a good to know, latest social media scandal is that Facebook is taking down fire alerts from government agencies in California. So always our website needs to be the point of record because we do not know what's going to happen if something we post on social.
Anything else?
Just a quick question. It occurred to me that as we start to roll this out, there could be a group that wants our input at their meeting. Do you ever envision or anticipate that? Like in addition to mentioning that perhaps in December we would be meeting the council, is there an opportunity, for instance, if the human rights folks say, well, can someone come and talk a bit about this? Or that could happen, and I don't know what our response would be if it did.
I don't think there's any reason you can't do that. I don't think there's any impediment here, as long as you don't have a forum at this particular meeting. They can choose a couple of people to go talk to a neighborhood association that wants like some face-to-face discussion with regard to this. But I'd also say that just based on history, when you have major recommendations and the council has adopted or altered whatever we're going to do with those recommendations, there will be a point in time where we want to circulate in the community to these neighborhood associations to make a presentation about what we're going to be putting on the ballot and why we're putting it. So that may be another opportunity.
Other thoughts?
On that note, I'm looking, does the council, because we talked about that last time, that the council had decided to break up the votes. Because there were so many.
Just an overwhelming
Right.
number of ballot questions.
And so would that be under council's final vote moves to propose changes to Assistant Attorney General? Is that also how you'd like to see it on the ballot goes for Attorney General approval?
Well, the
Because you're directing the clerk,
last spot here would be for us to set the date
the council.
for the actual votes.
Okay,
That happens after.
okay. So that's before, and then that's what you had handed the city clerk.
Right.
How many elections did you split it over?
Pardon me?
How many elections did you split it over?
2. Yeah, I mean, it was still, but, you know, I think at that time, we still had a primary council, but we did it on the primary, at the primary, because it's generally not as large a ballot, you know, during that time, so that's how we ran it last.
So let's go back to the charter
2
review
years.
process.
So 1 per year,
Oh, not to.
not back to back.
So the way I understood it is the Assistant Attorney General is going to send the approvals back to the city clerk. Do they send them to you?
Usually I would submit them on behalf of the clerk, but they would be sent back to both of us. But the approval is of a resolution that would already be passed by council at that point that would state the date that we were putting it before the people and also the ballot language.
So that would
And
come
so-
earlier.
So that would have to come before.
So that is going
That
to come, that city council votes on each proposed change, because that's when they're voting on that specific resolution.
And that's when they pick, they did have to split them, that's when they picked which ballot.
That's, yeah, they'd have to give me direction on how to draft those resolutions.
Yeah, I don't want to, you know, there may be proposals that city council doesn't want to put forward.
Sure.
So the resolution would probably have all the proposals that we already want to put forward in the resolution already. We probably wouldn't take, like 35 votes. We would probably take 1 vote with all of those proposals.
Or maybe 2 votes, one to say these proposals go on this election,
Right.
and another would say these proposals that we're gonna go on.
And I think Tony should talk a little bit about the influence or power Attorney General has with regard to this. Because it sounds like there's more authority there than it actually turns out.
Yeah, that's certainly correct in some aspects that we want to follow all of the guidelines that George Allworth is mentioned, I believe, one of our residents, one of the most senior assistant attorney generals, and he's been doing this for over 50 years. But there are exceptions set out within the Home Rule Cities Act. And so I just had a community where the governor, actually the Attorney General Allworth, recommended approval, but nevertheless, the governor decided that the submission was untimely and rejected it as untimely. Under the Home Rule Cities Act, section 22, which is MCL 117.22, there is an ability of the council subsequent to a rejection by the governor to override the objection by supermajority. And so that's what my community, that's what I would recommend in those circumstances, absent an explanation of the Attorney General saying, for example, like your math isn't right, or like these numbers, the numbers don't add up. It's inconsistent with other charter provisions. If it was for something perfunctory, like a certain allegedly being untimely, then we always have the authority at the council level to override and carry your wishes through to the ballot.
And I was looking at the National Civic League charter changes, and one of the things that they talked about is, I always want to say homeland, but the idea that you may conscientiously word and try to get around a state or federal law to keep yourself autonomous. Like, that's not undoable, and it's even one of the big goals. I thought that was interesting.
So just to give us an idea, since we kind of have some time here, because we've done some. When you're looking at a charter, do you try to keep it as simple as possible, or do you put as much detail? Or is that the prerogative of the committee? What is the general advice? I was reading through the MML, they give their advice on things, but they don't really say specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really a policy issue, and it's really about where you want to put the guardrails, because the charter puts guardrails on voter initiatives as far as ordinance initiatives that may be allowed under state law or through the charter itself. But it also puts guardrails on itself. And in a lot of respects, it can put it on other members, like your city manager and the administrative officers that report below him, as well as actually the city attorney. Some people want the document to be minimalist to account for the fact that it's a living document, or, this is a 1955 document. It's made it this long, but it does have a lot of sections that are now vestigial because state law has preempted them, things like that. To minimize that impact, you might want to make it as minimal as possible. But in other circumstances, I've seen very detailed charters double our size because they wanted the exact opposite. They wanted to show exactly how every section of government would function, including going down to the department level and the functions of each department. But at a high level, that's all a policy decision that would really be, based on this committee and your recommendation to the council.
And those things are already contained in our ordinances anyway, so that's already the law.
And so when we go through this, is it your thought that that policy decision should be made more upfront or chapter by chapter?
I think a high level conversation of the group is probably appropriate early on now or at the next meeting even. But when we get down to the detail, you'll see that some of the sections are kind of general for some given reasons, like preemption by state law. Some are very, very detailed and probably don't need to be, like some of our limitations on alcohol, for example, and that just didn't work very well with the passage of time. So we'll really have to look at them each section, but if there was trying to get an overarching theme of the group, maybe want a discussion on that issue.
I think one thing we do want to have as simple, normal language as possible, so people reading the charter that are lawyers can understand. I think there's.
You gotta switch with that. You be careful.
I know, that's what I felt I needed to say that.
And on that same issue, I just say that it's really up to this commission to, if you're reviewing this and making a proposal, whether it's simple or complicated, if we're looking for your recommendation. So I wouldn't try to limit yourself necessarily to, you know, the most simple language or whatever. If you feel it needs to be more complicated, then that's the recommendation that you're going to.
I think,
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's going to take getting into the charter itself until we figure out whether we need a more overarching kind of generality for each chapter, or whether we need actually to get down to the nitty-gritty on those things. I think even as a preliminary matter, it may be premature until maybe we do the first chapter or second chapter and realize how much we want to actually be more specific on each of these. I mean, right now we're talking sort of in the abstract, and it's hard to guess, and I think that's not going to change until we get into the charter itself.
And I also think it might be good, it might be premature to do that now before we've had our first public hearing too, where there's the mood of the residents that we hear from at that first public hearing as relates to guardrail on council, guardrail on city employees, city manager, they might have, the residents we hear from might have ideas about that we haven't considered that we want to consider.
Could I just go back for a minute to address Dr. Wilkerson Johnson's comment about addressing other committees? I'm concerned that if some of us, either as just a matter of trying to be cordial and convey information, might get, I don't want to suggest that we be skewed deliberately, but I think it might be more appropriate that if we get to a point in the charter where it looks like we need to address some of the other committees, commissions, boards, or whatnot, to communicate with them that that's what's coming up, and invite them to come to listen and participate in our discussion, rather than have 2 or 3 of us and make a presentation to them. I think would be a lot safer as far as Open Meetings Act is concerned, and certainly something that would give us all an opportunity to obtain feedback from those particular city functions that might be affected by our deliberations.
I would agree.
I totally agree with that too.
Well, then it sounds like, when you say it that way, it just brings to mind that we all hear the same message rather than having a telephone and interpret it to come back. So, yeah, so that might be the best way.
And also that we all deliver the same message as a body as opposed to, and I think that might be what Ben was thinking about as well.
I think the beauty of the whole thing is that we're engaging enough people out there, and yes, we bring them all back to this fold, but by all being out there, more people get a chance to give input and be aware of what we're doing.
Sure.
We really would hope that every resident in East Lansing knows about this opportunity.
Okay, so then as we go along, we don't have it on the schedule that we'll do this, but we'll just do it as a matter of perfunctory matter that we'll say at each meeting now, is there any commissions that we wish to ask to attend this meeting if they're able, as well as any staff person. I know you know staff people that want to do it already on certain pieces, but we might want some people too. So we should probably have that as a standing item that we'll look through these, the charter chapters that we're looking at and see who we want to attend. So that really requires us kind of doing our homework before we're actually at the meeting, sending out, we may not, like at the next meeting, we may not know until you've looked at that charter and thought about it, the first 3 chapters. Somewhere between now and that time of that meeting, you can send out an email and say, we'd like to invite this group or whatever, if you didn't know ahead of time. But it might be in our best interest to do, to always be ahead by two meetings. If we have read it, so we know when we're preparing for the next meeting. And we'll put maybe on the agenda each time preparation for next meeting so that we can discuss if there's anything that we need to do for the next meeting. Invite people.
Are you talking about inviting them to present or inviting them to attend?
To present if they have concerns and communicate.
And you could actually schedule a joint meeting with an affected board of commission. And that way you don't have an Open Meetings Act issue that might develop from them, from their end. inviting somebody to come, because then you run into the same problem we were talking about before, where maybe this person doesn't really represent all the ideas that are on that board position. So I suggest that if Tony's taking a look at this, as you guys go through it, and says, I think this will impact the authority of the planning commission to do whatever. That's the point where you can schedule a joint meeting with them, so you can have that larger discussion. Maybe they don't care, but maybe it's very important.
What about adding meetings ad hoc? There's notification to the public meeting. Is that, is that?
You guys have the authority to call special meetings, so.
There's no rule about notifying the public of the meeting.
No,
But
we have to do
you
it
have to
for
public
Open
notice.
Meetings Act. We have to follow the time that we have to do it 18 hours.
Oh, that's what I was just gonna say. I guess my thought was, I'm hoping that as we discuss, so chapters 1 through 3, then as we discuss, it may dawn on us who would be good to invite to the discussion around those chapters, too, right? Like that's, they come organically out of our discussion.
Yeah, just don't invite the council, but, we're gonna get to it anyways.
Well, we can invite you. Go ahead. Well, I had a question about, do our ordinances reference the charter? What's the interaction between our ordinances and our charter? Is there anything?
No, in the hierarchy, if you will, the charter, is over the ordinances.
Sure.
And so I don't recall any that would state, this is under the authority granted by charter section 7.2, for example, something of that nature. I don't think they're drafted in that manner.
And
So
then-
an example too would be the charter. The charter says how often council should meet. And then council puts a policy out that for this year, this is our schedule of meetings. So they don't say per charter, they just say this is the policy for the next year. So again, it's a guideline.
Where do you rest?
Well, because the comment came up that the ordinances are where a lot of the detail comes out. And I just thought, is that detail directly connected to areas within the charter? So can we say, oh, this is the area of the charter that is, generating these ordinances, or that these ordinances are falling under this charter guideline? Which to me would be kind of important for the wording in the charter. If there's something, in the ordinance, because the ordinance is where the rubber meets the road. So if we have things that are maybe in conflict, or it would just be interesting to see what ordinances.
But we have another conflict, but because we're just all top down. There's state statutes that give us the authority for the charter, and then the charter
Gives us
and
authority
the
for the
state
ordinances.
statutes give us the authority to do these details in our ordinance. And there's only, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think there's only 4 of our departments that are mentioned in the charter anyway. And, we have more than that we've created over a period of time. And so they are strictly, they relate to the authority of the council to react to the city manager's request that a new department be created. And then we fill in the detail with regard to it. So it's sort of in the charter, but it's, if we didn't follow the requirement of the charter that the city manager makes the recommendation to us, that we don't just say, hey, we're creating a new department, this is what it's going to be, then we wouldn't have a legal department that we could create. So I don't know that we have to make these references to the charter.
Oh, I'm not necessarily
Because
saying
it's
we have
done-
references, but you just have a context of as we look at.
Well, I think that's a really great example that Councilman Meadows brings up, is when we get to the section that says the following are the administrative officers. It's the city attorney, the city manager, the city treasurer, the clerk, the city engineer. It's a worthwhile question to say, are those all the directors, or do we have more? And that we do in fact have a lot more. And this would be a time where you would say, okay, so the other directors are, diversity, equity, inclusion, community and economic development, housing, and those kind of things, should these be added in? So I understand why you're saying it's necessary to know the interplay, and I'll try to make sure, to the extent I know about it, I'll be prepared for that piece of it, and try to fill in the holes as to where there is interplay like that.
Which is really going the other way. That is, something like this included in the ordinance. Yeah, no.
So if I may.
Yes.
So when I just bring up the ordinance, the code of ordinances, and under administration, when it gets to officers and employees, it mentions the city manager. There's a reference that in my absence, an acting city manager is appointed, and it references back to the section of the charter. So there is cross connection
Yes.
back. And so then it's highlighted, so you can bring up that section of the charter, and then it gets into department heads. It's
Search for charter.
otherwise provided by city charter. And that kind of stuff. So there's some general references back to the charter when needed in those code ordinances.
And then detail yet. In the charter, the more you're gonna have that going on forward. Thanks for that.
So chapter 7 is the one that talks about the administrative services. And when we talk about the city manager and their power, they can, with city council's approval, create these other departments. If you put it in the charter, then it always has to be that way, and to change that or to eliminate that, you have to go to the voters. So that's why the ordinance is having that, and making an ordinance like we did for the latest student commission that we had at the
Youth
commission. You know, you did it as an ordinance, and then
Much more robust.
we don't have to go to the voters to say, well, we need this commission.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really good example, because youth commission was passed sort of at the end of the last council, and then we have a new council. Realized that we had some issues with the way it was written. In January, we made another change to it. I think by March or April, we realized we still have to make another change to this, so it's easy to do. Otherwise, if we had all that in the charter, it's like, when's the next election, so that we can, make these changes.
And that goes back, I think, to Mr. Chuck's point about, do we want to consider about, do we do a big, how broad or how detailed do we want to get with the charter itself? And if we get things too detailed, then having to go back to the citizens every time becomes burdensome, and it really ties the council's hands as far as their discretion
And be responsible.
and being able to be responsive quickly to the needs of the community. We wouldn't be able to do that.
I think, yeah, we've been discussing it. I was gonna ask specifically, like, if there were any advantages to, like, putting departments that aren't currently in the charter into the charter, like, what the disadvantage or advantages that would be. And then I think, like, as we go through too, if we're like only putting in certain departments and not others, like,
Why?
what would our process be for that, and like reasoning, yeah.
And I think Jefferson just kind of touched on that, where it's enshrined in the charter. The ways to amend the charter are through this process or through ballot initiatives. And so it ensures that that position, if it's placed into the charter versus by ordinance, would be ongoing, and that you don't run the risk of an ordinance being changed by an initiative or by a council changing with different priorities and eliminating whatever positions were created, but only by ordinance and not by charter. But it also, again,
Your question, for instance, Parks and Recreation is not in the charter. I think the departments that we mentioned may have been mandatory charter provisions, and so that's why they're in there. But Parks and Recreation was originally called Parks and Recreation, and now it's called Parks and Recreation and Arts. And we made that change, and otherwise we would have had to gone back and had it on, at an election for the public to vote on something that probably most people don't care
Okay, so I was on the Parks Commission, I was on the Parks Commission and arts got slipped in there and we weren't even told. And then suddenly it popped. I hear that, but now I'm thinking, maybe that should have required a vote, because I think it's great, but then you know what I mean, that's,
Well, I would have had a council vote, I assume.
no, I know, but I'm just saying, as a person who's sitting on the Parks and Rec Committee, we didn't, the arts, we just had to read about
Well, let me
that.
just say I wasn't around when that happened, but my rule is you tell each of the boards and commissions what's coming up. And then they get a chance to weigh in on it before we actually
Yeah,
take.
my
it.
real vision would be that everything goes, if related to, say, the parks, for example, goes to the parks first, committee, and then to the city council. So we frequently, but we frequently got the same presentation that had already gone to council. And why would be a committee?
I think the way to think about it is that if the ordinances are written in pen, but the charter is basically attached to, like, it's
It's gonna take some serious.
it's a lot of work to get rid of,
it.
to fix any mistakes.
Yeah.
And so we want to do is, if our goal here is to make a workable community, to make the community more workable and more responsive moving forward, then we don't want to do things that are hard to undo. So I
Well,
think that's
depending if we want to make them hard to undo because we think they're critical. So that's,
Exactly.
it is.
The question is how much the process is going to be followed in terms of day-to-day governance.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the point I want to make as a finance person. I don't think you want to restrict what your ability is to make cuts in hard times. And that would be my concern about listing out a bunch of positions.
I think as you read and you read some of the chapter 7, we're just doing that one night, and I anticipate that will be a long night. I know that it's right before Thanksgiving, but there's a lot of different positions in there that have details, and perhaps some of you might not know why they're there. Like what exactly does the chief engineer do? Why is that such an important job? Because it basically is running a small city because of all the federal grants, all the different things that are coming through there, and the infrastructure and planning with the county and stuff. So that's such a critical piece to have somebody there because they're doing all that. Whereas if you have somebody that, I'm trying to think of a smaller department, so help me if we have a small department.
Well, communications, you need.
Okay, communications, yeah.
Typically cities don't have a dedicated communications department. East Lansing does, so there's certain departments like that don't exist in other cities.
So we'll give a little history on each of those at that meeting because that's such an important, I learned that by being on council, and I don't think the average citizen knows how much goes into, like the clerks that now, just because of the elections that have gone on, just the different things that are going on nationally. See how important that clerk's position is and what they're trying to do for voters' rights and stuff. And that becomes very important to a community to have that match with the state, which the state requires. It has a lot of requirements about what the clerk does. So that will be a long meeting. I know. Because just reading that chapter takes a lot of time to understand. So okay, we're this was just to get an idea of how we run that meeting. I think we have a good plan for doing that. I think if we just look ahead and look at the October 17th meeting, which is, we'll definitely do a review of the public hearing and the public comment, but we're talking about the boundaries and municipal powers and the general provisions affecting officers of the city. There's not huge stuff in that meeting, but I think it's good that we're all on the same page, knowing really what the boundaries are. We can have a little history on Public Act 350 and how we annex land and stuff, and so we understand boundaries, mail codes versus if you live in the city of East Lansing, it says you live there, but you're really not a voter there. We can have that discussion so that everybody's on the same page and knowing what that means, because a lot of people think that they live in the city of East Lansing, can vote in the city of East Lansing, but they're really in Meridian Township, but they have a city of East Lansing address. So maybe having a map for that, so we have the boundaries right in front of us and we can see with the the annexation of the land, so we have certain things sort of in limbo a little bit, would be helpful for that. And we can talk about the officers of the city. Anything else?
Quick question.
Sure.
Besides the voting district, other miscellaneous like that.
The voting districts are very interesting. So the map of that, I always have that out at election time. So the map of the precincts would be good to have too. I think, I'll just tell you an anecdote. The former chair of the planning commission used to interview people to be on the planning commission, and they would always ask about certain boundaries, and up Chandler Road is not East Lansing at a certain point. And for people to know that, I think this group to know exactly what the city of East Lansing is really important, because there's a lot of people who live here that don't know the rights and rules of that. And the school districts are another boundary too, but we won't deal with that.
Yeah, I would just say that, people have to realize that 48823 goes all the way up through Bath. So there are people in Bath whose address is East Lansing. Meridian Township is the same thing. We've even had people come to us and complain about how the police operated in their neighborhood, and would go, but that's in Meridian Township. So people, even though they have the East Lansing address, they're not necessarily living in the city.
I was the income tax administrator, about 30 to 40% of the people in that zip code are. I mean, it's, and they don't understand that.
Right.
They have it's their mailing. That's all it is. It's their mailing address, but they're in Meridian Township or in Bath.
So you think that the boundaries should be a simple thing, but for all of us to understand what that means is very important as we go forward. You'll be experts then. Yes.
And I know, depending on which 425 agreement, like with Meridian, zoning changes within that 425 involves a committee of the city council and a committee of the township of Meridian, their board, where in Bath, the city council has the right to make certain zoning changes, because it depends on how that 425 agreement was crafted. So I don't know how much detail you want to get into with some of these 425 agreements that took place in the 90s, early 2000s.
Right.
Yeah, we roughly went from, I think, 6.3 square miles to 11.2 square miles by virtue of those 4.
Okay. Anything else that we should talk about before we adjourn? I don't know that we have any old business. Any other comments here?
I had one question on the topic of the public meeting on September 26th. Was there any I guess for the structure of like the overview of the charter, was anyone designated to like present on that, or is it just gonna go like right into public comment?
I'd say Tony will make that.
Yeah.
Don't expect everyone who comes to have read the whole charter. Just don't have your hopes up. Okay? Just knowing what happens at public meetings. They usually just have certain concerns that they have. We've seen at some of the council meetings, people get mixed up between the charter and the ordinances and what they do. So in some ways, it helps that if we've all read through the charter before we have this meeting, so you know what's in there. I'm making notes on each page. I don't know, you might do it a different way, but just reading through it once just to know what's in there without even making notes is really important for that meeting, so that you can understand when they're talking about something. I just always remember the older gentleman who was talking about what he was so worried about something, and it wasn't exactly what had been told to him was the truth, and he was just so scared. It felt bad for him, so we have to gently kind of help some people. This belongs in the ordinances, but we're going to take notes of that. We'll pass it along to the appropriate people. the charter, what you're referring to, and just to be able to, you know, all of you can do it, don't just put it all on me. But I'll try my hardest to be as sharp on those things, but please feel free if you know something that you've read. Don't be afraid to speak up too, because it shows that we're all engaged. Anything else? All right, so we had an hour meeting this time. I don't think they'll all be this short. And we had our hour meeting last time, but it's good just to get to know each other and see where we're going. Again, I know Jeff was really worried about missing this meeting, so he has an audio of this, and we will speak. I need a motion to adjourn. And so moved by Wilkerson Johnson and supported by Dr. Martinez. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
So the audio is always going to be on.